In this video, we're going to show you how to replace a sway bar bushing on your Honda Accord. This will be located behind the motor on top of the subframe. Let's get started. Using a 19mm socket, remove the 5 lug nuts. Remove the wheel. Do the same thing on the other side. Using a trim tool, remove the plastic clip. There's one more in front. Should be holding the splash shield in. Remove that one as well, and do the same thing on the other side. There should be clips all down the front of this front bumper for this splash shield. Go down and remove all of the ones that are attached. We only have zip ties, so we're going to go around and cut all the zip ties to be able to drop the splash shield. Pull the splash shield out of this front and remove it. We're going to install a jack under the front of the subframe. I have a puck in here just so we don't mess up the paint. We don't want to really put any pressure on it, we just need it to hold. Using a 17mm socket, we're going to remove the front bolt for this subframe bracket on either side. We're going to lower the front subframe bolts. We don't have to pull these very far down, we just want a little bit of movement. Do the same thing on the other side. We're going to slowly lower the jack until the subframe rests back on those bolts. Then we're going to remove our jack to the back. We're going to go under the rear of the subframe with our jack. We don't need to put really any pressure, we just want it to be held. We're going to remove this body bolt for the rear subframe bracket using a 17mm socket. You may not have to remove it all the way. Do the same thing on the other side. Using a 14mm socket, loosen the 2 bolts for this subframe mount. Make sure that this bottom bolt is loose enough so that the shoulder of the bolt will go over this knurled part of the bracket. Do the same thing on the other side. We're going to loosen the rear subframe bolts. We don't want to remove them. We just want to get some space. Do the same thing on the other side. Go down on the jack until the subframe is touching the plate. We don't want a lot of weight on these bolts. We just want the room. Remove the bracket body bolts. Do that on both sides. We're going to remove the rear subframe bolts. We're going to go down on the subframe with our jack. We're going to reach up on top of the subframe and remove the bushings. We're going to go slightly down on our jack. Then we're going to use a pry bar and get on the top of the subframe and go in between the body and pull down. And as we pull down, we're able to get our ratchet up in there, onto the bolt, and remove the bolt. Our bolt is coming out very hard and I'm not able to use a ratchet anymore. So we're going to be using a 14mm wrench, getting it on the head of the bolt, then using a hammer to tap our wrench over. Slowly removing the bolt. Remove the bolt. We're going to go after the front bolt now, using a 14mm socket on a ratchet. Going to use a bit of penetrating oil. Remove the front bolt. I'm going to use a flat blade screwdriver to help me pry this bracket off. We're going to remove the sway bar bushing. We're going to pull it down towards the wheel well and then easily pull it off. Use a clean rag and clean off the area. We're going to use a bit of silicone paste on the sway bar. This will help us install the new bushing. You can also put some inside of the sway bar bushing. Install the bushing onto the bar. Make sure it's facing the same way as when it came out. Get the bracket installed over the bushing. Pull it down. Before installing the sway bar link bolts, we're going to clean ours with how hard they came out. You can use a wire brush or a wire wheel. You can also put some copper anti-seize on them before installing them as a little lubrication. We're going to get the bolts started. Get both bolts started by hand. Get the bolts snug. Torque the sway bar bushing bolts to 33 foot-pounds. If you can't get a torque wrench on them, do the best you can. Repeat the same process for the other side. Install the bushings for the subframe. Be sure they lock into place. You shouldn't be able to move them around. Go up on the jack. Don't push it all the way against the body yet. We're going to install the subframe bolts with brackets. Get these started by hand. Do the same thing on the other side. Go all the way up on the subframe. You can let it have a little bit of wiggle room. I'm going to snug these down slightly. Still want my bracket to move. We're going to install the bolts for the brackets. These bolts are going to be the long ones. The short ones were used for the up front brackets. Go all the way up on your jack. Be sure you're not pulling your car off your lift points. Snug down all 4 bolts. Remove the jack. We're going to remove this to the front of the subframe. Go up on the jack, being sure not to pull your car off the lift points. Install the front bracket bolts. Snug down the front subframe bolts. And then the bracket bolts. Do the same thing on the other side. Remove the jack. Using a 14mm socket, we're going to snug down the middle subframe bracket bolts. Do the same thing on the other side. Torque the mid-bracket subframe bolts to 36 foot-pounds. We're going to torque all 4 large subframe bolts to 76 foot-pounds. Do the same in the rear. And then do the same thing on the other side. Torque the front subframe bracket bolts to 40 foot-pounds. Torque the rear subframe bracket bolts to 69 foot-pounds. Do the same thing on the other side. Install the wheel. Get the lug nuts started. Snug the nuts down. Do the same thing on the other side. Torque the lug nuts to 80 foot-pounds in a star pattern. Do the same thing on the other side, and you're good to go.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.